The emergency beacon cut through the morning air of Settlement 7 like a blade. Commander Vexala's scales rippled with concern as the distress signal pulsed on her display. 2 Kreshtar cubs, missing from the nursery compound. In the 20 cycles since the Galactic Coalition had established peaceful contact with the human colony on Verdant 9, nothing like this had ever happened. "Mobilize the patrol units," Vexala commanded, her voice carrying the weight of species-wide maternal instinct. The Kreshtar were apex predators on their homeworld, but their young were precious, vulnerable. 2 missing cubs meant panic, meant searching every corner of the settlement, meant preparing for the worst. Within minutes, search parties fanned out across the colony. Sensors swept the forests, drones buzzed overhead, and at the center of it all, nursery keeper Thralin wrung her clawed hands, explaining through tears how the cubs had simply vanished during the morning feeding. "They were there, and then they weren't," she wailed. "Little Kix and Mira just gone." Antonio sat on the porch of his modest homestead at the edge of the settlement, completely unaware of the chaos unfolding 2 kilometers away. The morning sun painted golden streaks across his weathered face as he sipped his coffee, enjoying the quiet. He'd moved to Verdant 9 3 years ago, seeking solitude after decades as a cargo hauler. The frontier suited him. A tiny snore interrupted his peaceful moment. Antonio glanced down at his left shoulder where a small furred creature, no bigger than a terrier, was curled up, its crystalline whiskers twitching as it dreamed. On his right shoulder, an identical cub had wedged itself against his neck, purring softly. Both were striped in brilliant blues and silvers, their 6 legs tucked beneath them. "Still sleeping, huh?" Antonio murmured, carefully setting down his coffee. He'd found them just after dawn, mewling pitifully near his garden fence. They'd been cold, frightened, and clearly lost. What else was he supposed to do but bring them inside, warm them up, and feed them some of the protein paste he kept for emergencies? They'd devoured it, then promptly climbed onto him like he was a particularly comfortable tree. He didn't mind. They reminded him of the barn cats from his childhood on Earth. The sound of approaching engines made him look up. 3 Coalition patrol vehicles were speeding down the dirt road toward his property, kicking up clouds of red dust. Antonio frowned. In 3 years, he'd barely seen official patrols out this way. The vehicles screeched to a halt. Commander Vexala emerged from the lead transport, her reptilian features tense, her hand resting on the plasma sidearm at her hip. Behind her, a dozen armed guards fanned out. "Antonio Rodriguez?" Vexala called out, her translator rendering her hissing speech into perfect English. "That's me," Antonio replied calmly, not moving from his chair. Sudden movements around armed aliens seemed like a bad idea. Vexala's eyes widened as she caught sight of the cubs on his shoulders. Her scales shifted from agitated crimson to shocked pale green. "The cubs," she breathed. "These little guys?" Antonio asked, gently scratching behind one cub's ear. It stretched and yawned, revealing rows of tiny, needle-sharp teeth. "Found them wandering around my property this morning. Figured someone was missing them." The guards had their weapons trained on him now. Antonio's pulse quickened, but he kept his voice steady. "Easy there. They're fine. Just sleeping." "Step away from the Kreshtar young," one guard growled, slowly. "Can't really do that without waking them," Antonio said. "And trust me, you don't want cranky babies on your hands." Vexala held up a clawed hand, signaling her guards to lower their weapons. She approached cautiously, her predator's eyes studying Antonio with new intensity. Kreshtar cubs were notoriously aggressive with strangers, attacking anything unfamiliar on instinct, yet these 2 were snoring, contentedly, on a human. "How did you—" Vexala began, but words failed her. Antonio shrugged carefully, mindful of his passengers. "They were scared and hungry. I fed them, warmed them up. They seemed to like me. He paused. They're not dangerous, are they? Because they've been pretty sweet. Dangerous? Vexala's translator struggled with her tone, somewhere between laughter and disbelief. Human Kreshatar cubs have killed trained warriors who approached their nests. They are weaponized from birth. How are you still alive? Huh. Antonio looked down at the peacefully sleeping cubs. Little Kicks, he'd already named them in his mind, chose that moment to nuzzle deeper into his collar. Well, they didn't seem to get that memo. Liliana emerged from Antonio's house carrying a blanket, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She'd been Antonio's neighbor for the past year, living in the adjacent homestead. When she'd stopped by earlier for her usual morning coffee, she'd found him already adopted by the cubs. "Commander," Liliana greeted Vexala with a nod. "Before you ask, yes, we know these are Kreshtar cubs. Yes, we know they're supposedly deadly. And yes, they've been absolute angels." She draped the blanket over Antonio's shoulders, tucking it around the sleeping cubs. Vexala stared at the two humans, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was witnessing. In all of Kreshtar history, in all the documented cases across a dozen worlds, never had their young bonded with another species. Never had they shown this level of trust, this vulnerability, this affection. How? Was all she could manage. Liliana smiled and sat on the porch railing. Maybe it's because we didn't approach them as predators or threats. Antonio just cared for them, like they were any other lost babies. Antonio nodded. They needed help. Simple as that. The commander slowly lowered herself to her haunches, bringing her massive frame closer to eye level. She studied Antonio's weathered face, seeing something there that her species had missed about humans. Not their strength, not their resilience, not their infamous stubbornness, but their capacity for gentle compassion, even toward the alien and dangerous. "The Galactic Coalition has studied humanity for 2 decades, Vexala said softly. "We've cataloged your wars, your conflicts, your violence. We thought we understood you." She gestured toward the snoring cubs. "We were wrong." "We're full of surprises," Liliana said with a grin. Mira, the smaller cub, began to stir. Her eyes, bright amber and ancient beyond their weeks, opened slowly. She looked up at Antonio's face, then released a chirping purr and licked his chin with a rough tongue before settling back to sleep. Vexala's translator couldn't capture the sound she made, something between reverence and awe. "I should probably get them back to their mama," Antonio said. "She's probably worried sick." "Yes," Vexala agreed, standing. "But we will note this in our records. The day humanity taught the Kreshatar something about our own young." As the patrol vehicles prepared to transport Antonio and his precious cargo back to the nursery, Liliana caught the commander's arm. "Maybe the galaxy could learn something too," she said quietly. "About not assuming the worst in others." Vexala's scales rippled in the Kreshtar equivalent of a smile. "Perhaps we already are." The cubs snored on, safe and warm. Cradled in the arms of the species, the galaxy was only beginning to understand. End.